to console him and his wife. "I am damned if they will come here again," she had heard her father say about their visitors. "I will not be commiserated with because I was a fool to lose my money. I suffer enough living in this abysmal hole without having people telling me what is happening at what was my home and the home of my ancestors." If he had said it once, he had said it a dozen times. Although she realized that it was wrong of her, she knew that she was much happier alone with her mother. The Countess, however, took it in a very different manner. She made friends with the local villagers who she had never met before when she lived in the big house. She took an interest in the small school where the younger children were taught before they then moved on to a much larger one. In fact, Diana had a distinct feeling that her mother was happier in the small house than she had been for years in the large one. As she had often said to her daughter, it was falling to pieces over their heads. In actual fact, she was not to be aware for long how things had changed since her father's death. Their large house had been bought by a man who, they were informed before they met him, had made himself a millionaire. "How has he done it?" Diana had asked, only to be told by her father somewhat scornfully that the man who had bought their house had had his finger in every pie, and he did not think it was too clean in the first place. She did not really understand what he meant. Although William Walker had paid a huge sum for their house, and many people envied the Earl because of it, he could never bring himself to say a kind word about the purchaser. He refused, once they had moved into the smaller house, to accept any invitation to visit his previous home. "I am damned if I will go there," he said to his wife and daughter, "to see him sitting at my place at the table, and at my writing desk in the study. Ugh. You are not to go there either. You will stay here and put any invitation that comes from that man into the waste paper basket." Diana felt, when she had thought about it, that her father was being rather disagreeable, considering that Mr. Walker had given him so much for the house and grounds. Some of their close relations had said to her mother privately that her father ought to go down on his knees and thank God for finding someone who had been so generous. It was only later, when Diana met Mr. Walker, that she thought, while her father had been rather hard on him, it was quite understandable that he was not in any way the sort of person who one expects to find in a historic house belonging to an ancient and distinguished family. Then, when her father had died, William Walker became, almost overnight, a frequent visitor to their home. He had sent to her father's funeral a vast wreath of lilies, which was larger and more impressive than any other. Her mother had thanked the sender of every wreath and letter of condolence, but she had felt obliged to write a longer and more effusive letter to Mr. Walker, because he had not only sent a large wreath and a letter which was written on 3 pages, but began a habit of sending them anything fresh from his garden. This included fruit, flowers, and vegetables, and then after a week or two, eggs and chickens. "It is so kind of you, and I can only say how grateful we are," her mother had said in her soft voice. Diana did not like to think what her father's attitude would have been to receiving such generosity. It never struck her until too late that Mr. Walker was pursuing her mother in a very different way from what she had thought. There was certainly a very strong reason behind his kindness. It was, in fact, after she had been to stay with one of her relations who thought she was being kind in asking the Countess and Diana to stay for a week or so. Diana, too, felt that it was a kind act, and she was certain that it would cheer up her mother after she had shed so many tears. Somehow the house seemed dark, gloomy, and very quiet now that her father was no longer there. "I don't want to go, darling," her mother had said. "I don't feel I can endure the parties Cousin Edith gives so frequently, and I will, in my mourning clothes, make those who attend them..."